Good morning and welcome to All Souls Church. My name is Joe Maloney.
And I'm Alicia Jaromin. We're members of the Sunday Service and Music Committee, bringing you today's service along with Mary Mitchell, Judy Cobble, Don Swanson, and our music director, Jacob Clapper.
A few etiquette things. We keep everyone on mute for the service, except for our time of sharing of joys and concerns.
If you're new to All Souls Church, please take a moment to click on the link in the order of service and in the chat for our connection card so that we can stay in touch.
It's up to you if you want to turn your camera on and be seen. We do record the service, though joys and concerns shared will not be part of the final recording.
And if you speak during our discussion portion at the service and would like your part to be cut from the final recording, please contact me directly. Also, please feel free to use the chat box or ignore it.
During the service, please feel free to get up, move around, or take a break from the screen as you need, but try to be present as possible and imagine we are all in the same room together.
Finally, remember that when you are invited to sing or to pray, to share or to chat, how you participate or don't is up to you.
After church, we have some time to say hello in breakout rooms.
Now, hear these words of welcome.
All who enter in a spirit of curiosity, love, and justice are welcomed this morning.
Welcome to people who love God, people who don't believe in God, and people who live in the not knowing.
People who find a higher purpose deep inside, people who find it in a relationship with one another, and people who find it in the interdependence of all existence.
And all the people in between.
Whoever you are, whatever your gifts or abilities may be, however you identify your gender or sexual orientation, wherever your life and faith journey has taken you, you are welcomed here.
Whoever you are, whomever you love, however you understand the sacred, you bless us with your presence.
We light our flaming chalice with words from Lori Gorgas Hleiben. We light our chalice flame for those who lived their lives in closets of shame, for those who furtively visited the bars where nobody knew your name, for the Stonewall riot and the fierce trans women who fought, for the plague which still takes far too many, too young, too soon. So many gone, so many never lived to see out gay kids singing on TV, out gay people serving in the military, marriage equality, families formed by intention. We light our chalice flame for all these and for all our siblings of the rainbow surviving, living life out in the open with pride. And we follow the All Souls tradition of lighting a green candle, symbolic of our commitment to being a green sanctuary congregation. May both these flames call us to kinship with and great care for the earth and her living creatures. As we center our hearts, let's sing our chalice song for June, Sing and Rejoice.
Sing and rejoice, sing and rejoice, let all things living us sing and rejoice, let all things living us, let all things living us, let all things living us sing and rejoice, let all things living us, let all things living us, let all things living us sing and rejoice. Let all things living, let all things living us sing and rejoice.
As a spiritual community, we journey through life's ups and downs and hold each other in love. We take this time to reflect on our week, to recall the milestones, to the joys, the concerns, the sorrows, the changes in our lives, and those in need of healing. If you have a heartfelt milestone, joy, or sorrow you'd like to share, You're invited to share aloud or in the chat. If you'd like to share, you can come off mute, again by pressing the mute, unmute button in the lower left-hand corner of your screen, or by pressing *6 if you're calling in. Please share your name and briefly express what's on your heart. If you're having trouble unmuting, give us a wave and we'll try to unmute you from this end. After each person shares, we will drop a stone in water symbolic of the water gathered and blessed in this year's water ceremony. Please know that this section will end up in the final recording. What's shared now is kept only here in real time. All are welcome to share now. For all the sorrows and all of the joys spoken aloud and held quietly within our hearts, we drop one final stone. Let us center our hearts now and join in singing our centering hymn, Circle Round for Freedom, along with our virtual choir.
Circle round for freedom. Circle round for peace. For all of us in prison. Circle for release.
We're going to be sharing with you a TED Talk that we had picked out to encourage some discussion. And so the TED Talk is called 50 Shades of Gay.
Human beings start putting each other into boxes the second that they see each other. Is that person dangerous? Are they attractive? Are they a potential mate? Are they a potential networking opportunity? We do this little interrogation when we meet people to make a mental resume for them. What's your name? Where are you from? How old are you? What do you do? Then we get more personal with it. Have you ever had any diseases? Have you ever been divorced? Does your breath smell bad while you're answering my interrogation right now? What are you into? Who are you into? What gender do you like to sleep with? I get it. We are neurologically hardwired to seek out people like ourselves. We start forming cliques as soon as we're old enough to know what acceptance feels like. We bond together based on anything that we can. Music preference, race, gender, the block that we grew up on. We seek out environments that reinforce our personal choices. Sometimes though, just the question, what do you do, can feel like somebody's opening a tiny little box and asking you to squeeze yourself inside of it, because the categories I found are too limiting. The boxes are too narrow. And this can get really dangerous. So here's a disclaimer about me, though, before we get too deep into this. I grew up in a very sheltered environment. I was raised in downtown Manhattan in the early 1980s, 2 blocks from the epicenter of punk music. I was shielded from the pains of bigotry and the social restrictions of a religiously based upbringing. Where I come from, if you weren't a drag queen or a radical thinker or a performance artist of some kind, you were the weirdo. It was an unorthodox upbringing, but as a kid on the streets of New York, you learn how to trust your own instincts. You learn how to go with your own ideas. So when I was 6, I decided that I wanted to be a boy. I went to school one day and the kids wouldn't let me play basketball with them. They said they wouldn't let girls play, so I went home and I shaved my head and I came back the next day and I said, I'm a boy. I mean, who knows, right? When you're 6, maybe you can do that. I didn't want anyone to know that I was a girl, and they didn't. I kept up the charade for 8 years. So, this is me when I was 11. I was playing a kid named Walter in a movie called Julian Poe. I was a little street tough that followed Christian Slater around and badgered him. See, I was also a child actor, which doubled up the layers of the performance of my identity because no one knew that I was actually a girl really playing a boy. In fact, no one in my life knew that I was a girl. Not my teachers at school, not my friends, not the directors that I worked with. Kids would often come up to me in class and grab me by the throat to check for an Adam's apple, or grab my crotch to check what I was working with. When I would go to the bathroom, I would turn my shoes around in the stall so that it looked like I was peeing standing up. At sleepovers, I would have panic attacks trying to break it to girls that they didn't want to kiss me without outing myself. It's worth mentioning, though, that I didn't hate my body or my genitalia. I didn't feel like I was in the wrong body. I felt like I was performing this elaborate act. I wouldn't have qualified as transgender. If my family, though, had been the kind of people to believe in therapy, they probably would have diagnosed me as something like gender dysmorphic and put me on hormones to stave off puberty. But in my particular case, I just woke up one day when I was 14 and I decided that I wanted to be a girl again. Puberty had hit, and I had no idea what being a girl meant, and I was ready to figure out who I actually was. When a kid behaves like I did, they don't exactly have to come out, right? No one is exactly shocked. But I wasn't asked to define myself by my parents. When I was 15 and I called my father to tell him that I had fallen in love, it was the last thing on either of our minds to discuss what the consequences were of the fact that my first love was a girl. 3 years later, when I fell in love with a man, neither of my parents batted an eyelash either. See, it's one of the great blessings of my very unorthodox childhood that I wasn't ever asked to define myself as any one thing at any point. I was just allowed to be me, growing and changing in every moment. So almost 5 years ago, Proposition 8, the great marriage equality debate, was raising a lot of dust around this country. And at the time, getting married wasn't really something I spent a lot of time thinking about, but I was struck by the fact that America, a country with such a tarnished civil rights record, could be repeating its mistakes so blatantly. And I remember watching the discussion on television and thinking how interesting it was that the separation of church and state was essentially drawing geographical boundaries throughout this country between places where people believed in it and places where people didn't. And then that this discussion was drawing geographical boundaries around me. If this was a war with 2 disparate sides, I by default fell on team gay because I certainly wasn't 100% straight. At the time, I was just beginning to emerge from this 8-year personal identity crisis zigzag that saw me go from being a boy to being this awkward girl that looked like a boy in girls' clothes, to the opposite extreme of this super skimpy, overcompensating, boy-chasing girly girl, to finally just a hesitant exploration of what I actually was. A tomboyish girl who liked both boys and girls depending on the person. I had spent a year photographing this new generation of girls, much like myself, who felt kind of between the lines. Girls who skateboarded but did it in lacy underwear, girls who had boyish haircuts but wore girly nail polish, girls who had eyeshadow to match their scraped knees, girls who liked girls and boys who all liked boys and girls who all hated being boxed into anything. I loved these people, and I admired their freedom, but I watched as the world outside of our utopian bubble exploded into these raging debates where pundits started likening our love to bestiality on national television. And this powerful awareness rolled in over me that I was a minority. And in my own home country, based on one facet of my character, I was legally and indisputably a second-class citizen. I was not an activist. I waved no flags in my own life. But I was plagued by this question: how could anyone vote to strip the rights of the vast variety of people that I knew based on one element of their character? How could they say that we as a group were not deserving of equal rights to somebody else? Were we even a group? What group? And had these people ever even consciously met a victim of their discrimination? Did they know who they were voting against and what the impact was? And then it occurred to me, perhaps if they could look into the eyes of the people that they were casting into second-class citizenship, it might make it harder for them to do. It might give them pause. Obviously, I couldn't get 20 million people to the same dinner party, so I figured out a way where I could introduce them to each other photographically, without any artifice, without any lighting, or without any manipulation of any kind on my part. Because in a photograph, you can examine a lion's whiskers without the fear of him ripping your face off. For me, photography is not just about exposing film, it's about exposing the viewer to something new, a place they haven't gone before, but most importantly, to people that they might be afraid of. Life magazine introduced generations of people to distant, far-off cultures they never knew existed through pictures. So I decided to make a series of very simple portraits, mugshots, if you will. And I basically decided to photograph anyone in this country that was not 100% straight, which, if you don't know, is a limitless number of people. So this was a very large undertaking, and to do it, we needed some help. So I ran out in the freezing cold, and I photographed every single person that I knew that I could get to in February of about 2 years ago. And I took those photographs, and I went to the HRC, and I asked them for some help. And they funded 2 weeks of shooting in New York, and then we made this. I'm Io Tillett-Wright, and I'm an artist born and raised in New York City. Self-Evident Truths is a photographic record of LGBTQ America today. My aim is to take a simple portrait of anyone who's anything other than 100% straight or feels like they fall on the LGBTQ spectrum in any way. My goal is to show the humanity that exists in every one of us through the simplicity of a face. We hold these truths to be self-evident that all men are created equal. It's written in the Declaration of Independence. We are failing as a nation to uphold the morals upon which we were founded. There is no equality in the United States. It's when you don't have to think about it. It's as simple as that. The fight for equal rights is not just about gay marriage. Today, in 29 states, more than half of this country, you can legally be fired just for your sexuality. I've heard hundreds of people give the same answer. We are all responsible for equality. So far, we've shot 300 faces in New York City, and we wouldn't have been able to do any of it without the generous support of the Human Rights Campaign. I want to take the project across the country. I want to visit 25 American cities, and I want to shoot 4,000 or 5,000 people. This is my contribution to the civil rights fight of my generation. I challenge you to look into the faces of these people and tell them that they deserve less than any other human being. Absolutely nothing could have prepared us for what happened after that. Almost 85,000 people watched that video, and then they started emailing us from all over the country, asking us to come to their towns and help them to show their faces. And a lot more people wanted to show their faces than I had anticipated. So I changed my immediate goal to 10,000 faces. That video was made in the spring of 2011, And as of today, I have traveled to almost 20 cities and photographed almost 2,000 people. I know that this is a talk, but I would like to have a minute of just quiet and have you just look at these faces, because there is nothing that I can say that will add to them. Because if a picture is worth 1,000 words, then a picture of a face needs a whole new vocabulary. So after traveling and talking to people in places like Oklahoma or small town Texas, we found evidence that the initial premise was dead on. Visibility really is key. Familiarity really is the gateway drug to empathy. Once an issue pops up in your own backyard or amongst your own family, you're far more likely to explore sympathy for it or explore a new perspective on it. Of course, in my travels, I met people who legally divorced their children for being other than straight. But I also met people who were Southern Baptists who switched churches because their child was a lesbian. Sparking empathy had become the backbone of self-evident truths, but here's what I was starting to learn that was really interesting. Self-evident truths doesn't erase the differences between us. In fact, on the contrary, it highlights them. It presents not just the complexities found in a procession of different human beings, but the complexities found within each individual person. It wasn't that we had too many boxes, it was that we had too few. At some point, I realized that my mission to photograph gays was inherently flawed because there were a million different shades of gay. Here I was trying to help, and I had perpetuated the very thing I'd spent my life trying to avoid, yet another box. At some point, I added a question to the release form that asked people to quantify themselves on a scale of 1 to 100% gay. And I watched so many existential crises unfold in front of me. People didn't know what to do because they had never been presented with the option before. Can you quantify your openness? Once they got over the shock, though, by and large, people opted for somewhere between 70 to 95% or the 3 to 20% marks. Of course, there were lots of people who opted for a 100% one or the other, but I found that a much larger proportion of people identified as something that was much more nuanced. I found that most people fall on a spectrum of what I have come to refer to as gray. Let me be clear, though, and this is very important. In no way am I saying that preference doesn't exist. And I'm not even going to address the issue of choice versus biological imperative, because if any of you happen to be of the belief that sexual orientation is a choice, I invite you to go out and try to be gray. I'll take your picture just for trying. What I am saying, though, is that human beings are not one-dimensional. The most important thing to take from the percentage system is this. If you have gay people over here, and you have straight people over here, and while we recognize that most people identify as somewhere closer to one binary or another, there is this vast spectrum of people that exist in between. And the reality that this presents is a complicated one, because, for example, if you pass a law that allows a boss to fire an employee for homosexual behavior, where exactly do you draw the line? Is it over here by the people who have had 1 or 2 heterosexual experiences so far? Or is it over here by the people who have only had 1 or 2 homosexual experiences thus far? Where exactly does one become a second-class citizen? Another interesting thing that I learned from my project and my travels is just what a poor binding agent sexual orientation is. After traveling so much and meeting so many people, let me tell you there are just as many jerks and sweethearts and Democrats and Republicans and jocks and queens and every other polarization you can possibly think of within the LGBT community as there are within the human race. Aside from the fact that we play with one legal hand tied behind our backs, and once you get past a shared narrative of prejudice and struggle, just being other than straight doesn't necessarily mean that we have anything in common. So, In the endless proliferation of faces that self-evident truths is always becoming, as it hopefully appears across more and more platforms, bus shelters, billboards, Facebook pages, screensavers, perhaps in watching this procession of humanity, something interesting and useful will begin to happen. Hopefully, these categories, these binaries, these oversimplified boxes will begin to become useless, and they'll begin to fall away. Because really, they describe nothing that we see, and no one that we know, and nothing that we are. What we see are human beings in all their multiplicity, and seeing them makes it harder to deny their humanity. At the very least, I hope it makes it harder to deny their human rights. So, is it me particularly that you would choose to deny the right to housing, the right to adopt children, the right to marriage, the freedom to shop here, live here, buy here? Am I the one that you choose to disown as your child or your brother or your sister or your mother, your father, your neighbor, your cousin, your uncle, the president, your policewoman, or the fireman? It's too late. Because I already am all of those things. We already are all of those things, and we always have been. So please don't greet us as strangers. Greet us as your fellow human beings. Period. Thank you.
Hope you all enjoyed that. I wanted to start, this is not what I thought I would do, but I would like to start by asking people what stood out for you in this TED Talk? And then maybe we'll narrow it down a little bit. But there's anything that really just struck you as, oh, I hadn't thought about that before in listening to this speaker?
I'll jump in because I was the one that suggested this TED Talk. And the thing that I liked most was it really got me thinking about how far things have come and how far things have to go. And I don't know if any of you, if that resonated with you, I'm listening to it, I'm like, oh, this is old data. And then I'm like, I don't think there's been that much of a change on some of those things. Some of those things are exactly the same as they were in 2011. And why is that? And why hasn't anything been done? And what have I done to further the cause, which is nothing, basically. I mean, I know a lot of you are way more involved, but just the fact that it was older data and that the data hadn't changed as much as I would have hoped that it would have. I mean, marriage equality, certainly, yes, great, check. Moving along, like let's get moving forward. So that was my 2 cents.
The thing that stood out for me was the fact that there were hardly any men there in the audience. And maybe that's one of the reasons that there hasn't been as much progress, because I think men tend to be more judgmental about sexual orientation.
Well, something that stood out for me was when she started talking about the legal, where do you draw the line on legal decisions? Is it like someone who's had a little bit of gay experiences, or is it someone, where do you make the line? And that makes it really complicated, like more complicated than the legal system can handle, I think.
That reminds me to some of the questions in talking about white supremacy, when people were trying to figure out, after the Civil War, what percentage of African American, constitutes being Black and therefore able to be discriminated against. I mean, it's all what it's about. Is like, so where can we draw the line to discriminate against these people?
Say something. I'm a biologist by training, and I have been fascinated with the biology of gayness. And this talk really throws it into a complicated situation. I mean, what is with this spectrum of possibilities, the spectrum of biological role versus cultural becomes overwhelmingly bewildering. So I'm fascinated by it. I'll just leave it at that. But wow.
Is there anybody else who wants to weigh in on that? Linda.
I thought it was fascinating when she said, we're already here. all these shades of gray. We're already doctors, lawyers, Indian chiefs. You know what I mean? Like, we're already here, and people just don't seem to understand that. Like, everyone is doing all different jobs. And I think that was really interesting when she said that.
Mm.
Seen a better public relations speaker. She was fantastic.
Ross, can you speak up?
Oh, I'm sorry. I've never seen such a fantastic public relations speaker as her. She was amazing. Wow, just her sheer quality of presentation was amazing.
Yeah.
Hey, what is her name? Do you have that, Alicia?
It's
Yeah, go ahead.
Io Tillett Wright. Io, little I, big O is her first name. It's her, and I'm not sure. I've seen I've seen them referred to as he, as they, and as she. So as you can see, she's changing. Which brings me to my next question, which was that she points out that their parents did not ask them to define themselves by their sexual preference, which I think is unusual. Their parents just accepted them as they were, quote, growing and changing in every moment. Io points out that people fall on a spectrum of a million different shades of gay. And Io asks how people can establish where to draw the line that makes a person gay. So I am asking you, do you agree that the problem is not that there are too many boxes, but that instead we have too few boxes?
Yeah, I say that all the time. When you're filling out any kind of questionnaire or document, it's always Mr. or Mrs. or are you male or are you female?
It brings me back to our speaker, Lee Kinvey, who started out her talk with us about with the two boxes and with the male and female, the transgender issue, and saying, she said it's, we don't all fit into one of these two boxes. And she also, they also made the point that who is being served by these definitions? And what do people think about that? Who's being served by this, by trying to fit people into boxes that they don't fit in?
I would say data collectors. And by the way, I just did some research. IO now prefers male pronouns. So definitely has run the gamut. And I'm glad that he was able to do that. But yeah, no, I would say that the data collectors are the ones that make the boxes, and it's just for ease of sorting, really. That's all it is.
I would have a different view on that. I think the status quo is what is maintained, and many people feel like they have a higher position than others in the status quo.
Hmm.
I have another comment on the biology of this. In terms of genes on the sex hormone, on the X or Y hormones, and in terms of one's body shape, I would think that one could clearly biologically categorize people as either male or female. But it may not be that simple. I know that there are cases of chimeric male-female things, but then we want to go further into it. And what are the genes that might direct a person's feelings in one direction or another? And then there's a cultural input, and it's further complicated by the so-called epigenetic theory, where your environment can actually affect your gene expression. So this becomes a very complex biological question, which is fascinating to me, and we don't have the answers at all yet.
I will say that All Souls changed my perceptions on this issue, and in a good way. My son is openly gay, and he's in a long-term committed relationship. They do plan to get married at some point. And my son has opened my eyes on this in so many ways. And he's such a wonderful example of understanding that people need to be treated as individuals. And that there are so many parts of a personality, it's very difficult. Well, I don't think it's helpful to just focus on one aspect of someone's personality or who they are. Everybody is unique. That whole set of combinations is unique for each person.
Amen. Diane, did I see your hand raised?
Yes. Hi, can you hear me? Okay.
Yes.
I just wanted to point out something, and it's good news. Of course, we live near, in major population areas in the Northeast, particularly in Massachusetts and Boston, where I taught. And the kids in Boston, I haven't been there for a while, but in the high school especially, and even in junior high, they just accept that, and they accept differences a lot more. Not like when we were growing up. It's not like that at all, where they were shunned, and the most best thing you could hope for was they wouldn't be tormented. But that doesn't happen. I don't know what happens as you get further away from the city. And it does make a difference. I found that if you go like down country, you're going to get stuck in some, less people have, I find considerably, they're not sophisticated about that in acceptance. As I say, the kids, they just think nothing, are different of them, and they treat them like everybody. And they have gay clubs for them at the high school in Boston, and they can go there and they can vent and talk about and do what they want to do. And you don't see that. I don't think you see that too much in the suburbs, but it's good news. I'm always glad to see that, that they can fit in, find their niche, and be who they are openly. Yes.
Yeah. It's pointed out to me too, is that we're in Massachusetts, we're in a very, I think, unique environment.
Yes.
For the country, and it's way worse in what did they say? He said 27 states, and this is back then though, this is in 2012, but still 27 states it's illegal. Was that what they said? It was illegal, or you could be fired?
Yeah, it was, you could be fired. It was a terminable offense, and I was gonna look at that. I will Google that now though. Hold on.
I'll fill in while she's Googling. We have come a long way, but I can tell you back in the day when we all went and walked in Pride, the parade, my son was at Severian Brothers, a Catholic boys' school, and him and his friend from, what's the one in Boston? BC High, they had all their friends walking in the Pride parade with us. So all is not lost.
That's wonderful, Linda. That's wonderful. And so proud of, actually, Tom is such a wonderful example of what happens when a child is raised at All Souls.
Tom and Colin are still friends too.
That's wonderful to hear.
Yeah.
But you know what? I just lost my train of thought, so I'll leave it at that.
Welcome to it.
I would suspect that Maureen may have more updated information. She usually has her pulse on this, but it looks as if, barring the Equality Act, which I know has had some major issues, as of 2019, 33 states had some protection for LGBTQ, but that's not 50, and that's not close enough to 50, and it should be 50. 17 states still offer no protection at all as of 2019 for an employee that is fired based on sexual orientation, which is ridiculous because except a couple of fields, people that are illegal, people are not having sex at work. So why do we care who they have sex with? Personal opinion. Sorry.
Oh man.
Going back
Actually,
to my
I
comment.
did work at a place where people were having sex at work, but anyway, that's another story. Time.
So did I, John.
You know what? One pattern that I have observed is areas of the country where organized religions have a stronger foothold. there tends to be more prejudice. And I will come out and say that I am not a fan of organized religions, and a lot of what said in church services, candidly, even here in churches here in Braintree. I have friends in churches here in Braintree, and some of the stuff that is preached in those churches is absolutely disgraceful.
Mm. Interesting how our speaker today called out organized religion as and not in a good way. So anyway, John, did you have something you wanted to say?
Just going back to my early comment about the fact that there were mostly women in the audience. The people who are deciding these laws are mostly men. And so the fact that they were not in that audience meant to me that they're more likely to vote against things that would open it up for all people, open the society up for all people rather than discriminating on the basis of sex.
Mm. Oh, there's a real theme here going on about trying to see people more in their totality rather than just picking out one feature and to enable them to categorize them and then stereotype them. I was curious about what people were thinking when he showed the video Self-Evident Truth. The goal was to show that humanity that exists in every one of us through the simplicity of a face. So what went through your mind? I'd like to share what went through your mind, do you remember, while you're watching those pictures flash on the screen?
I would say that you really couldn't tell. I mean, the average person would not know they were gay, lesbian, straight, or whatever. I mean, they're, we're all human. It doesn't matter.
The thing that struck me was how few of them were smiling.
I noticed.
It reminded me of my first experience with the Gay Pride Parade and noticing how everyone looked really normal, except for a few crazies. But really, the vast majority of the people there looked super normal, and it just struck me at that time because I didn't expect it. I don't know why.
That's another categorization, is normal.
I thought it was interesting how the photographer chose to photograph everyone in black and white, because of course they could have done it in color, but I think that highlights the humanity and the similarity between everyone and their common humanity.
It's cool you picked that up. I hadn't kind of paid attention to that. That's totally true. Any other final comments or observations?
I just wanted to say, I heard Andy say he was glad his son grew up at All Souls. When I was in at 25 Beacon Street back in the 80s, I guess, on Gay Pride Day, and the parade came down Beacon Street, and several of us were there on the balcony at front of 25, and the whole parade stopped at 25 and clapped and cheered because they knew our position on their lifestyles. And we were kind of surprised, but very glad that at least we as a denomination were known to be accepting.
Yeah. Ross.
Some of us would like to see that video again. Could you give us the source information for finding that video? I would love to watch that again.
Yeah, I'll post it in the chat in just a minute.
Thank you.
And I would like to just invite a couple of seconds of silence and ask each of us to consider, what percentage of gay do you think you are? So thank you all for sharing. And it is time now to go to Judy for our closing words.
Blessed are the queer by H.P. Rivers. Blessed are the wanderers seeking affirmation. Blessed are the worshipers praying from closets, pulpits, pews, and hardship. Blessed are the lovers of leaving family and familiarity, leaving tables where love is not being served. Blessed are those who stay. Blessed are those who hunger and thirst for justice, for they will be satisfied. Blessed are the queer, disciples of truth, living, breathing, sacred reflections of divine love.
We invite you to give to support the LGBT Asylum Task Force. This is a ministry of the Hadwin Park Congregational Church in Worcester, Mass. The task force is dedicated to supporting and empowering LGBTQ people seeking asylum in the United States. They provide housing, food, clothing, and connection to legal, medical, and mental resources at other local agencies. Asylum seekers are not allowed to work for up to 2 years after arriving in the United States. So this vital ministry provides comprehensive support for the entire duration of the 2-year period in which it is needed. A link is going in the chat to donate. And if you found that you were moved by anything in today's service, please give generously to support this life-saving organization. You can give during the postlude or at any time after today's service by using the link in the order of service. And we're going to put it in the chat.
This is the Boston Gay Men's Chorus. We thought in these trying times to provide comfort, we would send out a performance of Everything Possible done by a virtual choir. All individual members of the chorus are all over New England recording on their own. Enjoy, be safe, be happy.
We cleared off the table, leftover steak, washed put them away. I told you a story, tucked you in time at the end of your knockout day. As the moon sets its sails to carry you to sleep over the midnight sea, I will sing you a song no one sang to me. May it keep you good company. Oh, you can meet anybody you want to meet. You can love whoever you will. You can travel any country where your heart leads, and know that I will love you still. You can live by yourself. You can gather friends around. You can choose one special one. And the only measure of your words and your deeds will be love, will be alive when you're done. There are girls who grow up strong and bold. There are boys quiet and kind. Some raise on ahead, some follow behind, some go in their own way and time. Some women love women, some men love men. Some raise children, some never do. You can dream on the day, never reach the end of everything possible for you.
For announcements, tomorrow at 3:30 will be our midday meetup connection circle, and that is an informal conversation. This coming Friday, the 18th at 10 o'clock will be our second connection circle coffee hour, and that is a themed discussion. This coming Saturday, the 19th from 10 to 11, we will have our outdoor flower exchange on the church lawn. Next Sunday, we will have our flower ceremony service on Zoom. And in 2 weeks from today at 10:30, we will be streaming the General Assembly service live in the parish hall and also on Zoom. If anyone would like to lead a summer service, then please email Mary or myself. And summer services will remain at 10:30 online and in the parish hall. Now, I just have one more additional announcement. I just wanted to update everyone regarding the ministerial search situation. So the ministerial search committee has recommended a candidate to the Board of Trustees. The Board of Trustees has accepted the recommendation and has offered a contract to this candidate. And as of right now, the contract is still being reviewed, and we will provide an update once everything has become official. I just want to say thank you very much to the Sunday Service and Music Committee, Dawn, you, Alicia, Mary, Judy, Jacob, and Joanna for today's service.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you, everybody, for participating. It was definitely a group effort. And I hope you all enjoyed. Well, thank you very much. And so we will move now into our discussion rooms.